think the best way to start it is thinking about this locally. So I want to read the tweet from Vince Fong. He said, "There is no doubt that President Trump won tonight's debate. Americans want a stronger, safer, and more prosperous nation again. I endorsed President Trump because he is the needed leader for our country for the next 4 years. And tonight he demonstrated why. He was the only candidate on the debate stage to clearly define a vision to build a vibrant American economy, control high prices and inflation, stop the border crisis, and rebuild our nation's credibility around the world. The choice is clear." So I guess the question is, was that a good characterization, especially for those folks that are watching here in Kern County?
For Vince Fong to make that tweet in the most Republican district in California, he's spot on. I mean, that's what we saw tonight for a traditional Republican voter. They got good red meat from Donald Trump, which is just what they wanted to hear. However, the challenge for Donald Trump is that I don't think he did a lot to move any undecideds toward him. All that being said, Trump was better, not because he was good, but because Joe Biden was that bad. He was horrible. He started out cold. He mumbled. His voice was raspy. He didn't look in command of the issues. This is not someone who is capable of being commander-in-chief for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and Brittany, to you, I guess the same question. A good characterization from Vince, or to what Matt was saying too. You know, it's a choice that's clear for Kern County, but maybe not necessarily for undecideds.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense coming from a Republican in the ruby red area of Kern County. But I also agree. I don't think that this debate really did anything to sway voters one way or another. I think it was a terrible night for Biden. I also don't think it was a great night for Trump. I mean, I'm watching coverage still of this right before we hopped on, and a lot of the reporters are saying we already have our fact checkers on this, and we'll see how many fact checks we actually come out with tonight. I don't know. I don't think it started very strong for Biden. Literally from the first steps he took on stage, even it looked like he was assuring himself, like, "Oh yes, this is my podium," right? So it was a terrible night. It's probably the worst debate that I've ever seen. I already had a migraine all day, and I still do. So I think that the ultimate loser is American people, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that's important to know too. It felt at first like Trump was coming on strong, but then it seemed like there's a lot of talk about, once Biden can kind of, I guess the well-laid trap of getting him to be vain, still has that impact on him, when he tries to talk about, especially it seems like nowadays the verdicts, the multiple verdicts in New York, the civil case, in the Eugene Carroll one, and then of course the other one, the 34 felony counts. That seems like an area where maybe he feels like he can win, maybe not based on policy, but kind of similar to how he was winning tonight, or Trump was considered winning tonight by his performance, or more so by Biden's performance. It goes the other way around as it relates to these court cases.
Yes, and I would say that when it came to substance, when you really, and I know that this is a totally different situation when you think about like the first televised debate that was JFK versus Nixon. If you were watching it, JFK won. If you were listening to it, Nixon won. I'd be interested to hear what people who listen to it might have to say, except for the fact that Biden's voice was very hoarse throughout the debate. And that's one of the points that a lot of people were making on social media. Frank Luntz has this focus group that they were concerned not only with his physical appearance, but the way that he was sounding too. So I don't know if that would necessarily work in this case. But if you actually took a second to read the transcript, I guess that will eventually come out of what he was saying, there was a lot of substance rolled in there. It just happened to be in between, some gaffes of things that we couldn't fully articulate what he was saying. And it's an unfortunate night for him. And then, of course, we have the flip side of Trump, who comes off extremely confident and loud. And sometimes when you are able to exude confidence, even if there's not the facts necessarily to back you up, people tend to believe that. And so I'm very curious to see what the American people think after tonight's debate.
Yeah, I mean, look, Donald Trump was Donald Trump. He's very short on specifics. He's long on generalities. He couldn't resist taking the bait, talking about the issues that are hot button issues for him, that the justice system is aligned against him, etc. But again, Joe Biden, he was not even able to coherently articulate the top issue for Democrats in the 2024 campaign, and that's the abortion issue. He fumbled around it on two different occasions. And yes, he is still smart enough to remember certain things that he's memorized about Trump being a threat to democracy and things of that nature. But if you extend beyond the basic and get him into a zone where he doesn't know the programmed answer, the elevator's not going all the way to the top on a regular basis. And the problem here is that domestically, he looks weak. How are our foreign adversaries going to look at someone tonight where strength is respected? That was not a position of strength tonight for the commander in chief of our armed forces. That should give everyone great pause. This was really scary tonight. I'm worried that it's going to tarnish Joe Biden's legacy.
Yeah, I mean, focusing on an issue that would bring people to the polls, it seems like, with regardless of who these two candidates are, it seems like abortion's an issue that just gets anyone out, and they'll vote based on how they feel, if they're pro-choice or if they're pro-life. Does this? I think, as you mentioned, it almost felt kind of skipped over. They had their debate. He kind of, it seemed, didn't articulate the point of pro-choice maybe as strongly as he could have, and didn't maybe he felt played in that moment. But are voters there going to still turn out regardless? I guess that's the question. What impact does this debate have on voters on an issue like that one?
I agree with Brittany here. I don't think that tonight's debate changed anyone's minds. I think that for the time being, Democrats are still going to vote for Joe Biden, and Republicans have coalesced behind Donald Trump. The challenge becomes is that, one is you have the Democratic convention coming up. I can't imagine what those dark smoke-filled rooms are going to be like in Washington, D.C. and other places about, really, is this what we have? And the flip side of that is, if you are a Democratic candidate running on the same ticket as Joe Biden, do you really want him at the top of your ticket right now? I mean, because you have 6 states that are going to determine the election. If you're, Senator Casey in Pennsylvania, do you want to stand next to Joe Biden and talk about America's future? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a follow-up there too, for you, Brittany, is that I know that it's so weird because in the past it had been that maybe Republicans who seem more normal than Trump would do better in these Senate races. And then now it's almost, even if you look at the Casey race, Casey's still ahead of McCormick and some of these other Senate races across the country, like in Arizona, even though Trump's 6-7 points ahead in Arizona, Gallego is still ahead of Kerry Lake there. Is it kind of the opposite effect now, where he's taking the party to where it is, and the only person who can do it or play Trump's game is Trump himself?
I would say that the best version of Trump is Trump, and basically that's it. When we've seen all of these people come forward and try to replicate it, they often fail and fail spectacularly. I think that we've also seen a pretty stark history or pattern of Trump's endorsed candidates in the primary not being able to deliver in the general election. I think perhaps that's also why the Trump campaign has sort of kept endorsements tighter to the chest this time and hasn't done as many, because they know that that is the criticism that they've received in the past, especially from Republicans who aren't totally on board with him, or those independents who perhaps are Republican or, are unsure how they want to vote this election. People can try, and I think we talked about this last time, Will, and people can try and they can go to the court cases and all wear their Trump-esque suits and ties and try to mimic him, but it's just not going to work. Trump has something special that is really only suited towards him, and I don't know that we'll ever see a candidate quite like him.
Yeah, just as a follow-up there too, you talk about what I think voters are lacking, what they're looking for here, and what they're trying to find in candidates they can't find in candidates. How much does the VP choice now have an impact? I mean, was this a smart move to not go in there and say, hey, my VP is XYZ, and kind of wait to see what the reaction is from tonight, or will tonight end up not having much bearing at all?
No, I mean, look, Trump right now, all of his VPs are auditioning in the spin room at CNN headquarters tonight. So I'm sure that the tape will be watched and he'll see who does well and who doesn't. There is something to be said in politics of building for a big event. The time to announce your VP pick is at the Republican convention. Trump is going to milk this drama for everything that he can to try to build excitement and create that energy right now. And I mean, as a challenging candidate, you don't have a lot, but this is one of the few things that you can do. For Biden, we know what the ticket is. Right now, it's Biden and Harris. So they have to come up with other things between the time of the Republican convention and the Democratic convention to generate that buzz and interest. So, I mean, I know what other campaigns would do, but I don't know if the Biden campaign is capable of doing that.
And I would say, kind of to what we were talking about earlier, I don't know how much this debate sways votes, but I do think that as these VP candidates are auditioning in the spin room, what we've seen today and the way that both of these candidates have performed, the VP is going to be important. And I know that people have been talking about it all over social media already tonight. Not only people saying like, oh, should Biden step aside, but also people saying, well, I guess, Kamala is at the outskirts of this stage, ready to jump in as needed, I guess. And so I think that they're absolutely, Trump loves TV. He loves to watch it. He loves to comment on, fake news. I think that he's going to be very closely monitoring the way that people are able to support him, and their styles are all going to be completely different. You have folks like Lee Stefanik, for example, who's definitely been sort of a pit bull for him, and then you have folks like Burgum, and actually don't recall if he's there, but I assume that he is. Burgum, who's sort of more of a traditional politician and not getting too heavy-handed with his words, I guess. But I think he'll be watching, and it can make or break someone, perhaps, but maybe not the voters, just the VP.
So I guess that's the big question here is, since it's being talked on social media, we may as well address it as well. I mean, is there a realistic chance that there's a replacement of a presidential candidate based on a poor performance in the debate and, of course, the poor numbers that we've seen?
Well, whether by choice or by just dumb luck, the Biden campaign demanding an early debate opened up the door to certainly a conversation. It's very, very difficult to undo the will of the voters in a number of states unless Biden were to literally go to the convention and release his delegates. I don't see anyone willingly releasing his or her delegates for the highest office in the land. I think that the Democrats they have buyer's remorse right now. They're not happy. They didn't have a proper competition. And I think that right now, Joe Biden we need to see if this was just chalk this up to a bad night. But boy, he's stringing together a lot of pretty sketchy performances to make this a bad night. So, Brittany, I'd love to hear what the Democrats have planned, because I think this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can colloquially, or people can colloquially talk about replacing a candidate, but when you think about the technicalities of it and how much work goes into all of those primary states and getting on the ballots and like all the money that's been fundraised, and then what would happen with that money, it's just such an uphill battle to actually go through with it. But what I will say though is that people are very disappointed, and like researching, and everyone's talking about this debate over the last few days. I guess presidents traditionally don't do as well during the first debate, incumbent presidents, but this was a pretty bad showing. So would there even be a second debate? Would there be an excuse to fight? Exactly. Would there be an excuse to, not have a second debate? There's also in the spin room, right? Like before people even got to the spin room, reporters were saying that they've been talking to folks on the Trump campaign, and it sounds like on the Biden campaign, sounds like Biden's been sick for a few days, but of course that wasn't reported prior. And so it's very interesting that people are trying to lean in on this notion when in reality, when you're in this business, it's your job to be able to spin doctor a little bit if you're a communicator. And so that might have just been what was happening. And if we look at Biden and sort of the way that he's interacted with press or just, whenever there is video footage of him, he does have sort of that raspy voice. It doesn't sound to me as though he's just sick. That's sort of something that has that he's been sounding like during his presidency. And so I just don't totally buy it.
Right. But I think that there's to the argument that the raspy voice on its own doesn't sound great, right? I mean,
Sure.
yeah, it's a weak spot to begin with, for
Yeah.
people who are looking for energy. Um, I guess speaking of raspy voices, Gavin Newsom was there, so he was in attendance. Um, when you see, I guess, even if you disagree with his message and during the State of the State, which has its own number of controversies here in California, being that it was pre-recorded and edited, um, just the way that he was able to deliver that, does it make nationally you want to try and jump ship if you could? Obviously, the way to do it would be incredibly difficult, but the fact that he's there and trying to fight for it to give Democrats, I mean, some hope that there's somebody out there who can boost their numbers, or are they, I mean, or as we've kind of established, are they pretty much stuck where they are?
To be honest, I kind of think that they're stuck where they are. I would be very nothing, I guess, is really surprising anymore. But this would be one of those things that would surprise me if something would change, just given the historical context of how difficult it is to mount these campaigns in the first place. But you know what? Weirder things have happened, honestly. So who knows? But I think that we will be seeing this ticket as it is on the Democrat side.
Gavin Newsom has been very, very successful as Joe Biden's attack dog. He has demonstrated his willingness and his, I think, not willingness, a great desire to go into red states and on Fox News and other channels that are more to the right and take on the Republican beast as he so proudly, wears that badge. And look, the problem right now for Democrats is that you have in Gavin Newsom a mid-50s governor of the largest state in the union who is fit, who is mentally at the top of his game, and he just presents such a visible contrast to the gentleman that is allegedly at the top of the ticket. You can't help on optics alone just making the comparison. That and Gavin Newsom is also really tall, so it I mean, yes, he's a great spokesperson for Donald or for Joe Biden, but boy, does he present a very sharp contrast between what could have been potentially and what we have.
And just the last couple questions for you. I've kept you guys long enough, but I want
Sure.
to kind of touch on the frustration. I guess that you'd see some from some voters, and maybe perhaps Kern County is a good example where you have, as Brittany mentioned, the Ruby Red district in the middle of Ruby Red County in the middle of the country or middle of the state here in a blue wave. Here where they're going to vote, but it may not feel like their vote has that much say. Then it can have, I guess, kind of a psychological effect down the rest of the ballot. But I mean, some people are going to vote Republican all the way down, some not. I mean, what effect do you think this whole election and the candidates that we've been given across the board have on turnout? Because turnout was very low for the March primaries, not only in California but in lots of other parts of the country. Will that continue for this general election in the fall?
Well, there's a reason why turnout is higher in presidential years than in non-presidential years. And it's primarily because of enthusiasm at the top of the ticket. So either you have a high profile presidential race. I mean, don't forget, even though Joe Biden did abysmally this evening, this is still a really close race. I mean, it is by no means over. So, I mean, that alone is going to drive turnout. In California, we're a state that, I mean, the polls close at 8 o'clock. By 8:01, we know that the Democratic candidate will have won in California. So the challenge is, how can every other race from the federal to the state to the local level, how can they capitalize on this enthusiasm to drive turnout for them as well? So, I mean, there are lots of ways. Each race in a sense is unique, but I do think there will be an aggressive push by the Democratic Party to make sure that their voters do turn out, precisely because they want to make sure that they elect voters up and down the ballot. And the Republicans try to do the same thing. So, I mean, but look, turnout's always higher in presidential years than in non-presidential years. So it may not be 2020 or 2016 level high, but it will be high.
I'll be interested to see what that turnout does look like come November, because I think that there is a lot of voter apathy and fatigue when it comes to this rematch of Biden and Trump. I mean, it was earlier this year, polls were indicating that I think it was close to 70% of Americans wanted someone else to be going against them, and that's not where we are as a nation. Obviously, that's not what the two candidates that have been chosen up until this point. And so I think people are tired and not necessarily super excited about this election or enthusiastic about it. I'd also be interested to see what the numbers are coming off of this debate as far as viewership compared to other presidential years. I think that it's going to be interesting. And I think that the party that's able to garner the most enthusiasm is going to be the one that ends up being able to win. And perhaps that's the way it is every election. But particularly in this one, when people are kind of fatigued, I think that's going to be incredibly important.
William, I will say one last thing. I would be highly surprised if there's another debate. I think that what we have likely seen the only presidential debate in July for the November 2024 general election. There is virtually no way that Team Biden is going to agree to. They would rather fight it out with hundreds of millions of dollars on TV and in controlled media appearances for their candidate rather than subject him to this.
And what do you want to put on that? What prices are we putting these? I know you had the beer bet before.
I was going to say we've already got the beer. We'll round it out. We'll make it a full dinner.
Perfect. That sounds good. Well, I got one last question for you, and I guess this is
Brittany. You are invited. Win, lose or draw.
There you go.
We've got 3 different area codes here, so we'll find a way to make it happen at some point. But no, I was going to say the last question I have for you, and speaking of full dinners, the full course meal, I know that Democrats have been targeting David Vallejo's seat and John Duarte's seat. Friend of ours, Tim Rosales, friend of mine at least, Tim Rosales is working on the Michael Maher campaign as well to go after Jim Costa's seat. Is this a good night for Republicans in those 3 districts, even if you're not going to see Trump endorsements by a few of those candidates?
I don't think that. Again, I agree with Brittany that this was a national phenomenon. This was a proof point in this debate for Donald Trump and for Joe Biden. Donald Trump squeezed by, not because he did well, but because Joe Biden was that bad. It has no effect down ticket right now. But if Joe Biden sticks around, it could have disastrous consequences in some very close races across the country.
And as for our local folks, as a Republican here who worked a lot with Vallejo's office, especially, and also Duarte's office, I think that they're well known within the communities, and I think that they'll be just fine. I think that Kern County is very civically engaged, knows what's going on with their politicians, holds them accountable, and likes to be there and support their candidates. So I think that they'll be okay, despite what may happen on the presidential ballot.
Steaks? Is that the
I'm good with red meat. And Brittany, you're spot on. That was great answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you guys again.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Murcia with Eyewitness News Bakersfield Now on YouTube. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel, where we have tons of great content to choose from. While you're here, go ahead and click on the subscribe button right there. That way you can stay up to date on all the things related within Kern County. Thanks for watching.